Hello, and welcome to the next episode of the Live Your Spa Life show. Spa life is a lifestyle that accepts that accomplishment and harmony coexist. The Spa and Spa Life, the SPA, is for Seek Power Always, that power within you to do your deeper work in the world. I am so thrilled to introduce to you our special guest today, Dr. Rhoberta Shaler, who is the Relationship Help Doctor. She provides urgent and ongoing care for relationships in crisis. So tune in if you or anyone you know, who is not in that category, to listen into this conversation. Rhoberta's mission is to provide insights, information, and inspiration for clients and audiences to transform relationships with themselves and other humans, to be honest, respectful, and safe in all ways. Rhoberta, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Diane. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, it is, I need to just jump in here with that you've had even the United States Marines seek out your help. Please explain that one.
Well, whenever two or more are gathered together, the potential for conflict exists. So that's truly the case. The whole idea that we have the United States Marines is that we have conflict. So when teams want to work together or need to work together, they may find conflict. And so I've worked with many organizations, but the Marines really stand out because they had so many levels. When you're working in an organization where you have a small team, but one person is an enlisted person, one person's retired, one person's excluded, one person's managerial or supervisory, all of these different things. And then we are supposed to get something done together. That's why they called me.
Oh, this is so great. I am so inspired when people put their passion into helping with relationships. And, I believe all of us have had some sort of experience where things have maybe gone off track. And I know that this is something that you really have put your life's work into, and not only in, being the author of 16 books and 2 podcasts and YouTube channel. You are out there in a very big and powerful way. And you have created a term that I have not heard anywhere else. It's your own term of its own called a hijackal. And I would love for you to explain how that term came about and what does that mean?
Yes, well, these days people are seeing more and more information coming across about people who are kind of toxic. They're relentlessly difficult. And I noticed, Diane, that what they're doing is they're rushing to the internet and they're saying, this is what's happening. And they forget that the internet is not a mental health professional. The internet's an index. So the index spits back some psychological terms and diagnoses. And then the person says, oh, well, there's the problem. So I wanted to give people a term to use that would talk about the patterns, traits, and cycles of these toxic interactions without excluding it by using some psychological term. So I created the term hijackals, and I trademarked that, as you mentioned. And what that is, hijackals are people who hijack relationships for their own purposes. And then they relentlessly scavenge them daily for power, status, and control. And when you understand that you're with a person who has hijackal tendencies, you recognize that you're part of that relationship. You didn't just exclude them by having a diagnosis. You say, hey, I'm here too. So what am I doing? Am I condoning these behaviors? Am I enabling these behaviors? What's really going on? So that's why I created the term.
Right. And so, so many times when we're actually in a relationship, we can't necessarily see what's in front of us because there's those little things that happen each day that build up. How would you know you're actually in a hijackal relationship?
Well, you will certainly know that everything turns out to be your fault. That's a big one. Secondly, every time you have a conversation, that hijackal has to win. So if they have to say black is white in order to win in the moment, they will. And if 10 minutes later they need to say black is red to win, they will. And then when you say, but a minute ago you said black was white, you say, you don't listen very well. And everything becomes your fault.
Right. So when you recognize you're in that situation, because a lot of times, maybe years into, you may have children, is it always necessary to leave that relationship? Is there anything to do to repair that relationship? What are the actions?
Well, the first step is yourself. First of all, you need to work within yourself because, the work that you do, strengthening people to seek power always. I mean, where is the power within yourself? Are you actually feeling self-empowered? Are you feeling like you know who you are? Because if you've been in a relationship with a hijackal, you've been put down, worn down, and torn down more than anybody else who isn't in that kind of relationship. So the first step is to work on yourself, to find out, who am I? What are my values? What's my vision for my life? What are my beliefs? And what are my best next steps?
So why is it, I mean, if knowing the characteristics of a hijackal, you would think on the outset that you wouldn't want to be in a relationship with them. So what has us be attracted to them that you actually get kind of, for lack of a better word, sucked in?
Well, you are sucked in because they do what we call love bombing. They have this unique ability to be a chameleon, to kind of hone in. Their radar works really well. They know what it is you want. They kind of can sense everything that would make you happy, and they give it to you. These are the kind of people who say, oh, I know I'm going to marry you. And they only just met you 12 minutes ago, right? Or we're destined to be together, or you're my soulmate. And they know nothing about you. But there you are, you've been waiting for somebody to say that to you, and this person says it, and you go, oh, wow, this is wonderful. And so you go down that path, and even though you may be wondering about a few things, you're afraid to whip off your rose-colored glasses and see the red flags. So you stay.
Right. Oh, I so get this. And, you and I have had some private conversations. I was in a 6-year relationship with definitely a hijackal. And, for those listeners out there who either had one in their past or are currently in one, there can be some embarrassment and some shame in that. I mean, I'm someone who has a master's, who has been successful in many different areas and feels that this aspect of my life was something that just, kind of giving myself that, bad judgment and how did I not see this and those kind of things. And, a lot of the things you're talking about, saying the things that you want to say and, we'll say thing one time and then completely change it the other way around. And that I always felt wrong. And it's just so interesting to see that it's not something that just happens on the first date. It's like this eroding that happens over time. Is there something that we can offer to any of the listeners who may be in that and may be feeling shameful, and maybe their friends and family actually don't even know the depths that they are in because they've kind of kept that behind the scenes? What would be some of the steps that they could do to start moving out of this?
Good question. First of all, it's important to not beat yourself up, to just say, okay, here's the present situation. I'm not going to go into, he done me wrong, ain't it awful, how could I be so stupid, what's wrong with me? Don't go into any of those places. I know they're hard to avoid, but don't go into them. And then say, now, how could I figure out who I am today? And maybe find out what made it so that this was acceptable to me. Maybe you had a hijackal parent. Maybe you've been in a previous hijackal relationship, and so you're kind of comfortably uncomfortable with this, and it's familiar, and so you didn't walk away from it. You kind of thought, oh, I can handle this. I know how to do this. And so that's a good skill to have in your toolbox, but it's not the one you want to be living from. And so it's important to evaluate, say, is it all right with me the way I'm feeling and the way I'm being treated? And if it isn't all right, then start there and say, no, who do I want to be? How do I want to be? And what do I want from a relationship? And what am I willing to put in a relationship? And then the big question, Diane, is, do I know how to clarify and express and maintain my boundaries?
Boundaries, such a big, big topic in so many areas of our life. I think one of the things, and let me know what you think about this, Rhoberta, as far as, a lot of times we break boundaries and commitments to ourselves. And when we do that, it seems like it just moves that boundary over enough to then let other people trample over that as well. Can you speak more into boundaries? We hear about them a lot, but how does it apply to this scenario?
Well, let me just say something in response to what you just said. If you don't keep your promises to yourself, you've already taught yourself you're not trustworthy.
Yes.
And so when you go into a relationship, you go in with that basis. So you need to keep your promises to yourself, but you need to spend enough time with yourself to clarify who you are, what your values are, and your vision for your life. But then you are at the point where you can know what's all right with me, what's not all right with me. And basically that's what a boundary is. Knowing what's okay and where it becomes not okay, and being able to say, this is okay, this is not okay, and saying, and this is what I prefer. And then you begin by expressing that to someone, and start small. You know, don't start with, if you don't change your behavior, I'm out of here. Start with something small and then practice. But you need to know that boundaries need to be non-negotiable. So don't set one unless it's non-negotiable. It's not wiggle room. It's like, okay, not okay. Very, very clear. So start with small things and then work up to them so that you feel some confidence and that you feel you have the right to be assertive. Now, you know, as you mentioned, I've written a lot of books, and in my book, Kaizen for Couples, I talk about the personal weather report. And why that's important is it allows us to understand that we have the right to be assertive. And some people think assertiveness is aggressiveness, and we don't want to confuse those two. But if you believe that you deserve to take up space and draw breath on this earth, then can you entertain the idea that you also have the right to say what you think, feel, need, and want, as long as you do not mention any other human by name or pronoun? And if you can get into that place where you can simply say, I know what I think, feel, need, or want. Like maybe you say something like, you know, I feel really disrespected right now, and I think it has to do with what I'm hearing. And what would really work for me are words like this and this I can hear. That's very helpful in a relationship, as opposed to, you know, you're really disrespectful and I hate the way you talk to me. Okay, that's not going to work well. Particularly not going to work with a hijackal. So boundaries can simply be clarified, expressed, and then maintained, and then respect grows, if it's possible for respect to grow. But if you're with a hijackal, you have to calibrate whether or not respect is possible when you set boundaries.
Yeah, I love that clarification around asserting, because, you know, there's certain words I think that trigger people. Even when I say the word power, some people feel triggered because they think of mispower. They think of how it's used in a way that is not supportive. And I always like talking about power in terms of it's not something that's outside of you, that you are your own power. It's actually within you. And so as part of these boundaries and being assertive is really, isn't that just getting access to your own power, to feel comfortable, to be able to actually to share that? I mean, what do you think?
Well, I think the more clarity that you have about who you are and what you value, and that you can express that, and the better contribution you make to any relationship and to your life. And so that kind of clarity is a step towards you understanding how to put yourself forward in the world. And that's what allows you to develop some confidence, is I know who I am, I know what's okay, I know what's not okay, and I know that if I'm with something that's not okay and I can't do anything to change it after trying, that I'm okay with saying no to it.
Right. And I think that where it comes back to those boundaries of, you know, can you stand up for yourself? Can you actually say no? And if you find that people are not listening to your assertiveness, or maybe you are feeling disrespected in that, then those are all signs, right? To be able to look at, you know, this person maybe doesn't have my best interest at heart. I maybe don't have my own best interest because I'm not listening, right, to what it is that really means something to me. And I know for you, we've talked about how you consciously create your life and how you really design and utilize your own like values and beliefs to really create the life that you want to have. How are you utilizing that to stay in alignment with who you are and the kind of life that you want to live?
Well, it's really important to spend time with yourself. Many people are going as fast as they can in all directions every day because they bought into the be more, do more, have more, repeat, recycle. So it's very important to know who you are. And the only way you can know that and the way you can reflect on whether you're representing that every day is to spend some quiet time and to say, how am I doing? Am I actually living in alignment with what I say I believe or what I say that I value? And if you're not, then you can make corrections, large and small. But if you don't stay in tune with yourself, you can get quite off base and have to return to yourself to recover. So I think certainly one of the things for me is that quiet time every day to just say, okay, let me catch up with myself. Let me just sit down and say, how am I doing? How do I feel about myself today? How do I feel about my interactions? How do I feel about what's happening in my relationships? Am I actually living in that alignment? And when I stay in touch and in tune with myself on a daily basis, then I can make tiny corrections and feel even better tomorrow.
So important to have that time, alone. I've had, several of my guests, we've been talking about the busyness that's out in the world of just doing to be doing. And a lot of times it's been uncovered that, a lot of times the busyness is so that we don't have those quiet moments, because then we do need to listen to maybe make a change in our life or, make those shifts and really listen to our own inner callings. And so really, in fact, my last guest was talking about how she broke her ankle and was forced to stay home. So sometimes there's some things that happen that force us to have these times and moments alone to actually look at our life in a different way. And part of this, like, secret to having like an impact, you talk about your spiritual understanding. How does that fit into these conversations with being comfortable and being with yourself?
Well, my spiritual life is the basis of my life, so it's very, very important. And I believe that I am 100% responsible for teaching people how to treat me, as well as looking at how I treat myself. So those two things, the spiritual beliefs and my belief about how to be in the world in an honest and straightforward way, allow me to create relationships that have the three hallmarks that I believe every healthy relationship has. And that is equality, reciprocity, and mutuality. And so until I have that within myself, you can't give a gift you don't have, can you, Diane?
Not at all.
So if I don't have it within myself, I can't give it to the relationship. I can't give it to the world. And if I don't spend time collecting that and making sure that I have a good harvest, I don't have it to give. So that becomes very important. And my spiritual beliefs are very supportive in that way, that walking in that alignment with those beliefs allows me to have total confidence and flexibility and know that I can manage anything. And that's such a gift.
Yes, absolutely. And, speaking of, creating, environments and things that support us, one of the questions I love asking my guests is, we have a different experience in our bedroom versus our kitchen and our living room. What is your favorite room in your home and why?
Oh, wow. My favorite room is my living room, and that's because I have created it to support me. So I bought myself the most comfortable leather recliner that is slimline and not something huge. I just feel very good about it. It sits where I can see my altar, where I can see the things that inspire me. It's got a place next to it for my tea and my water and the book that I'm currently reading. And then my grand piano is there. So I have everything that reminds me about who I am and how I express myself in the world.
Oh, I love it. It sounds like such a beautiful space. So what is the book you're currently reading?
Oh my goodness, I have a couple on the go. I'm actually rereading a book. Oh, and I'm not going to remember the name of it. But it's on, it's called Eastern Mind, Western Spirit. No, something like that. I'll have to look it up for you. But I'm rereading it because I love it and it inspires me. Yes, Eastern Mind, Western Body.
Oh, love it. Oh, it's
Yeah,
so good. I love rereading books because I'm somebody who writes notes in books and highlights
me too.
books. And then I go back and I see the parts that I highlighted, and then there'll be something else that'll pop up to me. And so I love the richness of the deeper aspects of those. What is your favorite book that you wrote?
That I wrote. Oh, well, I just did an interview on LA Talk, and it was on my book, which happens to be sitting right here, called Kaizen for Couples: Smart Steps to Save, Sustain, and Strengthen Your Relationship. And I don't know that it's my favoritist, because I don't know that, it's like children. You don't have a favorite one. But what I like about it is that someone said to me, why don't you put everything you tell your clients into one book? And as to how to create a healthy relationship. So I really like that one. And the other one is an ebook. It's still in ebook form, but it's called Escaping the Hijackal Trap. So that you know how to recognize that you're in a toxic, difficult relationship, maybe with a person with the patterns, traits, and cycles common to narcissists or sociopaths or psychopaths, or even borderlines. And then it helps you understand what you can do and what you can't do. So those are important pieces, I think.
Right. Well, kind of along with that, as far as resources, I know that you have a free gift for our audience about spotting a hijackal. You want to tell a little bit about that?
Yes, because sometimes when I'm chatting with someone like you, Diane, on air, someone says, well, how do I know if I'm with one? So I have a free ebook called How to Spot a Hijackal. And you can find that at hijackals.com. And you spell that hijack, ALS.com.
Perfect. And we'll have that in the show notes for people to click on those links and be able to connect in. And then, you and I had a little conversation before about this coercive, I'm going to say this wrong here.
Coercive control.
Say that again.
Coercive control.
Yes. So we were talking about coercive. Why can I not say that today?
Coercive.
Coercive. Maybe it's a block in my head here, but we were talking about coercive. Wow, that is so funny. What is my own block here? Corrosive.
Coercive. Where you coerce someone into doing something.
Coerce. Wow, that's so funny. There's certain words that just kind of click in. Coerce. Yeah. Okay. So you and I were talking about coercive control, and would love you to expand a little bit about what that is and how it's having its impact in this kind of work.
Well, coercive control is something that hijackals what they want is an patternation. And abusive partners, primarily coercive control primarily happens with males over females. And it's repeated physical or verbal or even sexual violence, but it's based in intimidation and degradation and isolation and control. And so it's cumulative. So what we were talking about is, maybe someone is choked and they call the police, and the police come and there are marks on a neck, and so that's obvious. Okay, some violence occurred. But the real thing that we want police and law enforcement and judges and courts to recognize is the repeated pattern of coercive control, which is the insinuations, the threats that I will hurt you, I will take away your bank account, I will destroy your phone, I will surveil you, I will call you every 10 minutes. What are you doing? Why aren't you here yet? It took you 8 minutes to get home from work. It usually takes you 6. Where were you? I mean, all of these things are coercive control. I'm coercing you to tell me exactly who you are, how you are, and I have the control over you. And this is an incredible way for people to corrode another human being.
Right. I remember, because we had so many calls of domestic violence when I worked as a police officer, and you're right, the ones that have the physical evidence, those are obvious and you take some immediate action on. One of the things that were, prevalent is the homes that you would go to over and over again, which led for departments like San Diego, where we had to report on, what the person actually said, because then you're actually able to get these quotes and these patterns that are happening. But it can be very challenging because, as you know, the hijackals can be very charming, even to police officers, to get their point across. And it can be very frustrating that as soon as we leave, other things unfold, which then, can have the person, whether you call them victim or just the circumstances that are happening, to continue to happen, and then they don't feel heard. Is there some advice you could give to people in general in being able to report things like this? Because sometimes we see these things and we just don't know. We feel like, oh, it's not my business or what have you. And for people in law enforcement, how they can better either document this or make strides along these lines when it can feel like your hands are tied, that the full picture isn't necessarily given to us at the time.
Yes, and in San Diego, we're particularly fortunate that we do have that reporting process, because when you see cumulative reports of the same things over and over, then you have good documentation to take to court. But what a person needs to do also is to keep that same documentation, save all the text, save all the voice messages, have them transcribed, keep them, because they were sent to you. And whatever state you're in, you need to understand whether or not there is a law about one person being able to record a conversation without the other person's knowledge. Many states do not allow that. Some states do. So if you get into a repeated situation with someone and you're in a state where you can legally record it without their knowledge, do so. I have clients in some states that allow that actually wear a voice-activated recorder at all times, so that we can get ongoing, obvious evidence that this happens on a daily basis. So documentation becomes extremely important. And then tell your friends, have a therapist, tell your therapist, because they can then support you in that documentation. They can report that it was disclosed. And if there is any physical or sexual abuse, a therapist has to disclose any lack of safety that is happening in a relationship, so you have help and support.
Yes. Oh, it's so important. And what were some of the things that led up to this work for you? I mean, has there been a time where you felt disempowered yourself, and how you were able to move through that?
Great question. I was raised by two hijackals, so I know this from the get-go. And I was raised in a small town. So when I went to talk about what was happening to me, I had a father who abused me in many ways. I had a mother who was a hijackal, very abusive. My father was very passive aggressive. And so he was more of a covert hijackal, always the victim. Life is always terrible. Mother was very coercive, very demanding, very mean and all. But always remember this: hijackals paint a public picture of perfection and also create a private place of pain at home. Yes. So when you go out and you're in a small town and you say this is happening, the person that you went to for help says, "Oh, but they're wonderful. How could you say that?" And this happens so much because unless you go to a mental health professional who is specifically trained in this area, the hijackal goes along in order to manipulate and exploit and charm the therapeutic person into believing them, so that they can align with the mental health professional and re-wound the person that is already being wounded. So you need to really understand those dynamics. And so this all happened to me. I have walked through it all. And of course, when you're raised by hijackals, you marry a hijackal. Then you end up, if you recognize what's going on, divorced and co-parenting in that situation. I learned a lot. And I learned that I was hijackal bait and a hijackal magnet and what I had to do. So I developed all the programs out of necessity for my taking my PhD in psychology and understanding what's really going on here because it happened to me. And I have walked through every aspect of this.
Right. Oh, and it's so important. And thank you so much for sharing your journey because, you know, a lot of times I think when people go through these kind of things, they think that they're the only one, right? And so when you hear that people have actually moved through this, that there are actual tools to do that. And I know part of your show, which of your podcasts would you recommend that people can really kind of hear some scenarios when people actually interact and you do some support around that?
Well, I have two podcasts. One of them is an interview show, so sometimes that happens. It's called Transforming Relationship with Emotional Savvy. But then I have another podcast, Save Your Sanity, Help with Toxic Relationships, which is just me talking about all the aspects and what you can do about them when they arise. So depending on whether you want to hear other people's stories or you want good information and strategies, you'll choose between the podcasts.
Right. Perfect. Well, I know that a lot of our listeners are going to want to stay connected with you. How can they do that?
Go to transformingrelationship.com. There you can see my blogs. You can find the podcasts. You can find my YouTube channel, which is called ForRelationshipHelp. Over 270,000 people have watched things there. And it's really something to immerse yourself in. If what I've been saying today goes, yeah, that's really what's happening. And I've been second guessing myself and questioning my sanity and basically asking myself, am I the hijackal? That's just what they want you to do. They've got you on the run then. So if that's resonating with you today, there is help. Just go to transformingrelationship.com. And if you want to talk to me directly, you know, right now, I do make an offer for a full 1-hour consultation to new clients. And you go to beaclient.com.
Oh, perfect. That's so generous of you. Well, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and being here with us today. Any final thoughts before we sign off?
Yes, just one. The most important thing is no matter what anybody says, always believe their behavior. And particularly if you have a hijackal in your life.
Such sage advice. Thank you so much. And thank you for being here on the show. And I want to thank everyone who's really spending their most precious resources, their time being here with us. All of the links that Rhoberta mentioned will be in the show notes. I also have my free gift in there as well to resetyourpowergift.com. You know, all these different ways where you can really have those resources within yourself. Those will also be available to you. And no matter what platform, if you're listening or you're watching on the show, please put in the comments, what was an aha for you? What's a takeaway? If you have any questions, please tag both Rhoberta and myself. We're happy to be of service and to support you in any way that we can. And share this. Please, subscribe and share, because this is a conversation that not many people are having, and they may not know the resources that are available to really make a shift and change in this, that you're not alone in this kind of conversation. So please share and comment, and thank you again so much for being here. And until we connect again, live your spa life. Bye for now. Bye-bye.